Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking to you about resistance training. If you're not resistance training right now, I'm hopefully that this video can convince you to do some resistance training in an intelligent, progressive, and systematic way. If you already are resistance training, perhaps this can be a lesson of enlightenment for you. Convince you yourself that this is good, that you should continue doing it. When somebody first comes to me and they want to resistance train, the first thing I get out of the way are the functions of resistance training. Many people have misconceptions about resistance training. Maybe they think resistance training is good for fat loss and weight loss, and it can be indirectly. However, the three primary functions of resistance training: number one, getting stronger; number two, building muscle; number three, improving athletic performance. In the worst case scenario, you're just maintaining muscle mass, strength, and performance depending on what your goals are. For example, if your goal is to lose weight, resistance training will have a different function versus if your goal is to be better at a sport. If you're trying to lose weight, the goal is to maintain as much muscle mass as possible as you're losing fat and water. Research shows that if you're trying to lose weight and you're just doing it through a calorie deficit, you are going to lose a high proportion of muscle mass versus somebody who does resistance training. And that's the function of resistance training in the context of weight loss. It's going to help you maintain the muscle mass so that when you do tone down and you lose weight, you're going to look good. You're going to look leaner, you're going to look tighter, you're going to have more muscle definition. Otherwise, you're just going to be a skinnier version of your 30-pound overweight self. When it comes to getting stronger, it's virtually impossible to gain appreciable amounts of strength without resistance. And resistance can be you using your body weight fighting against gravity, you pushing against inertia on a machine, you lifting free weights, an external load. They're all resistance. You're fighting against an external load that places an opposing force on you, or you're fighting against gravity. That's essentially what resistance is. Or if you want to make this a little bit more simplistic, you're putting more physical stress on your body than what it's used to on a day-to-day basis. Walking around, that's great and everything. It's good for being active and getting out there, not being sedentary. However, you're not going to build that much muscle by just walking around. You're not even going to build that much muscle running, because when it comes to resistance training, we're going to go into a little bit, there are a couple of components with resistance training that need to be present if you want maximum results. And of course, athletic performance, you're placing additional stress and stimulus on yourself, hopefully to prepare your body for game day. You know, there's that saying, you train harder, you practice harder than you play. When it comes to resistance training, you're trying to emulate game day situation and trying to overload your body so that when game day does come around, if you've recovered properly, you're going to be a much better athlete. Two things that resistance training is really great for that a lot of people don't know. Number one, the hormonal environment that the body gets put into following resistance training. There are three major hormones that are released when you engage in resistance training. One of those hormones gets released in any physical activity, but the two big hormones out of the three that resistance training releases more than any other physical activity: testosterone, which is great for men, it's great for women too. Even though it's characterized as a male sex hormone, women do have naturally lower levels of testosterone. But when you bump up those levels, women can build muscle, which is good for anybody. Women have better hormonal balance. They have better immune system response, and you have a stronger immune system because testosterone is an immune system modulator. And then also, growth hormone, the youth hormone, helps you look younger, helps you anti-age. Of course, up to a certain extent. You have bodybuilders and competitive athletes who look a little bit beyond their years simply because they're competitive athletes. When you become extreme to 1 degree, something gives. So when you're trying to get to the extreme of human performance, your health is going to suffer because you're not getting paid millions of dollars to be in great health. You're getting paid millions of dollars to be a competitive athlete and win for your team. And then the third one is endorphin. Endorphins are released when you run, when you swim, when you bike, get that runner's high. That's an endorphin rush. That's basically your body's reward for you surviving. Endorphins are natural painkillers, and they're released in anticipation for you being in a dangerous situation. Let's say 30,000 years ago, you had to fight with a lion or a wildebeest, and your life was on the line. If you got bit or you broke a limb, if you had to feel that pain, it would incapacitate you and you wouldn't be able to combat to the best of your abilities. Well, endorphins help mask that pain so that you can fight through it. And of course, other hormones are released: cortisol, adrenaline. Those are stress hormones because the body does see exercise as a stress. However, it's an acute release of stress hormones. In other words, that acute release can be better controlled since you are voluntarily placing that physical stress on yourself. It's a physical stress. And when you recover and you eat properly, that stress response will sensitize your body to adapt and to recover so that you can come back faster, stronger, and more resilient. So some stress is required, and that's exactly what resistance training is going to do by releasing those hormones. And then the second benefit that many people don't realize is when you resistance train and you do it correctly, and we're going to talk about how to resistance train correctly or some of the correct principles of resistance training in a different video, you get put into what's called metabolic flexible state, or in other words, your body partitions nutrients differently. The macronutrients are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Working muscle prefers to use carbohydrates, especially during high intensity activity, sprinting, jumping, weightlifting. Carbohydrates are the preferred energy source. When you resistance train on a consistent basis and you start building muscle and you start using carbohydrates as a substrate, your body will start to store the carbohydrates in the muscle because that will expedite the recovery process, which is required for building muscle, getting stronger, and getting healthier and improving athletic performance. A person who is sedentary and does not resistance train will not use carbohydrates at the same rate. So what a normal person, a sedentary person, might experience is called carbohydrate spillover. The standard American diet is characterized by high fat and a high carbohydrate diet. And when you have both, in addition to a high salt diet, it's the recipe for weight gain. But especially when it comes to carbohydrates, and carbohydrates have gotten a bad rap for this, when you eat too many carbohydrates and you don't burn it up through exercise or high intensity activity or through a low carb diet, your body will convert whatever carbohydrate it can no longer store in the liver and muscle tissue into fat. It will convert it into fat. The liver will convert it into fat. It's not an easy process. The body would much rather take the fat that it gets from food and store it directly, but it happens if you tap out your storage quota for carbohydrates, which in an average human being is of anywhere between 400 to 500 grams. As you train, as you build more muscle, that storage capacity goes up, which lends credence to metabolic flexibility. So in other words, if you resistance train on a consistent basis, you can get away. You have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to eating sugars, carbohydrates, and quote unquote crappy food. So you have the hormonal response and you have nutrient partitioning, which are two physiological metabolic consequences of regular resistance training. And if anything, those two could be the primary reason why you resistance train, so that you can train to eat or you can live to eat. Those are the three factors that you want to resistance train. And those are two of the big benefits that resistance training can offer you on a physiological metabolic basis. In a different video, we'll talk about how do you structure a resistance training program from an overarching standpoint. How do you know that the resistance training program that you're about to embark on is intelligent, it's progressive, it's systematic, and it's going to give you the results that you want. All right, so hopefully I gave you a little bit more information on why resistance training is great for you, made the case for why you should resistance train, and hopefully you can tune in my future videos talking about resistance training. Again, resistance training is how I got started with all of this, and I've seen the transformative effects of resistance training. So I am an avid proponent of resistance training, especially when it's done correctly. All right, so this is David at Strong by Lee. If you have any questions, please give me a shout, drop me a line, ask me a question, David@strongbylee.com. And if you're my client, you know how to reach me.